For 12 years, he became everything she needed: father, guide, and protector. But when her real father unexpectedly returns, their fragile world shatters, forcing them to confront love, loyalty, and the bonds that truly define family. David woke before dawn, as he always did. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds marking the start of another ordinary day. The kitchen smelled faintly of toast and coffee, scents that had become comfortingly familiar over the 12 years he had spent raising Lily alone. He watched her sleep for a moment, the sunlight spilling across her tangled hair and the gentle rise and fall of her small chest. Even now, after more than a decade, her presence still made his heart ache with a mixture of pride, love, and a subtle, lingering sadness. It had not been easy. No one had told him that becoming a father overnight, after the death of someone else, would demand so much courage, patience, and constant vigilance, but he had embraced the role without hesitation. "Morning, sleepyhead," he murmured, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Lily stirred, blinking her eyes open slowly, her small yawn stretching into a smile that made all the sleepless nights worth it. "Dad, is it Saturday today?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and lingering sleepiness. David smiled, watching her rub her eyes as she sat up, the thin blanket falling around her shoulders. "Yes, it's Saturday," he replied, keeping his tone light. "And you know what that means?" Her eyes lit up instantly. "Pancakes!" she exclaimed, bouncing to the edge of the bed. David chuckled, feeling the familiar warmth of their small, predictable joy. Saturday mornings had become their little tradition, a ritual that gave structure to their lives and a sense of stability that both craved. He followed her into the kitchen, hearing her chatter about school projects, friends, and an upcoming recital she was nervously preparing for. Even in these small exchanges, he noticed the subtle ways she was growing, the way her voice now carried confidence, the way her thoughts stretched beyond what a child her age might usually ponder. As he poured batter into the sizzling pan, he thought about how much he had sacrificed to create this life. There were nights he had skipped meals to ensure she never went without. Weekends spent working extra shifts so she could have dance lessons, art classes, or a field trip to the museum. Each choice, each sacrifice, had been a conscious decision to give her a world full of opportunities and love, even if he sometimes felt hollowed by the cost. And yet, seeing her laughter spill across the kitchen like sunlight, chasing away shadows, reminded him that every sacrifice had been worthwhile. "Careful, Lily, pancakes are hot," he warned gently as she reached for the stack, her small fingers eager and impatient. She giggled, deliberately blowing on the warm surface before taking the first bite. Later that morning, David helped her with her school project, guiding her hand as she glued pictures onto a poster board. They talked quietly about the planets, dinosaurs, and the tiny differences between the stars in the night sky. But the conversation inevitably drifted to questions about her mother. "Mom loved art, didn't she?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with both longing and wonder. David paused, considering how much to reveal. He had promised himself he would tell her the truth when the time was right, but today was not that day. "Yes, she did," he said softly, trying to keep the sadness out of his voice. "She would have loved to see you paint the way you do." Lily smiled, though a faint shadow of sadness crossed her features. Even at 12, she carried the weight of a loss she barely understood, and David felt every pang of it as if it were his own. He wanted to shield her from all the pain, even the small, invisible hurts that came with growing up fatherless in body, but not in love. The afternoon passed with quiet routines. They walked to the park, hand in hand, where Lily played with other children, laughing with abandon, while David watched from a bench, a book open on his lap but largely ignored. He observed the ease with which she interacted, The way she stood her ground in games, the way she consoled a crying classmate with surprising empathy. Pride and love swelled in him again, along with a subtle fear of the outside world that still lingered. Every scrape, every disagreement, every disappointment she might face outside this protective bubble felt like a personal failure. Even though he knew he could not control everything, returning home, they cooked dinner together. Lily had begun learning the basics of cooking, and her small hands trembled with excitement as she chopped vegetables under his careful supervision. "I want to make something amazing for you, Dad," she said, eyes sparkling with pride. David felt a lump form in his throat. "Everything you make is amazing," he replied, trying to sound casual, though emotion cracked his voice slightly. They ate together, talking about small victories and silly misadventures. The sound of their laughter filling the apartment that evening brought a quiet calm. David settled on the couch, Lily curled up beside him, a blanket draped across both of them. She rested her head against his shoulder and began to read aloud from a book, her voice steady and confident. He listened, marveling at the sound, feeling the weight of all the years spent together, the fragile trust and love they had built brick by brick. He thought about the future, about the inevitable changes that would come, and a small shadow of fear crossed his mind. He had done everything to protect her, yet life always had a way of shifting unexpectedly. Before bed, David tucked her in, lingering at the doorway, watching her drift into sleep with a contented sigh. "Good night, Lily. I love you," he whispered, the words carrying the depth of 12 years' worth of devotion. Her small reply, "I love you too, Dad," was all he needed to feel whole. In that moment, he allowed himself to believe that nothing could shake the foundation they had built, that their quiet, simple life was enough. Yet, outside the walls of their apartment, life moved unpredictably, and the past, carefully tucked away in photographs and old letters, was never truly gone. Shadows of unknown futures, of questions yet unasked, lingered at the edges of his mind. But for now, in the warmth of their shared routines, David let himself breathe, let himself hope, and let himself be grateful for the simple, extraordinary gift of raising the girl who had become the center of his universe. The day ended in quiet, contentment, yet with an unspoken understanding that life, with its twists and turns, might one day challenge even the strongest bonds. The ordinary rhythm of their lives shattered on a crisp morning when the doorbell rang, echoing in the quiet apartment like a sudden thunderclap. David opened the door to find a man standing there, tall and unfamiliar, yet carrying the unmistakable weight of history in his gaze. Mark, Lily's biological father. For 12 years, David had carefully guarded her from this presence, choosing silence over conflict, protection over confrontation. Now, Mark's eyes held a mixture of guilt, hope, and an almost desperate longing that David cannot ignore. "David, I need to see Lily," he said, his voice steady but carrying the tremor of emotion. David stepped back, the instinct to shield her immediate, while Lily, drawn by the sound, appeared at the top of the stairs, curiosity and recognition flickering across her face. "Dad, who's that?" she asked, her voice a mixture of innocence and instinctive caution. David swallowed hard, feeling the familiar tightening in his chest, the years of effort to create a secure, predictable life suddenly teetering on the edge of upheaval. "That's someone from the past," he said, keeping his voice calm, though every muscle in his body was coiled. Lily tilted her head, sensing that there was more to the story, and that unspoken tension sparked the first flickers of doubt she had ever felt about the man who had been her entire world. Mark crouched slightly to be at her level, hands open in gentle reassurance. "Lily, it's me, your dad. I know I've missed a lot, and I'm sorry. I just want a chance to know you." Lily froze, the words stirring a storm of emotion she could barely name. She had always wondered about him, the man in old photographs, the figure her mother had once cherished, and now he was here, real, tangible, and close enough to touch. Curiosity battled with loyalty, excitement fought with fear. She glanced at David, searching for guidance, for the reassurance that the world she knew was still intact. David met her gaze, his eyes soft but wary. "Lily, remember what I've told you? People can come and go. Some things are complicated. Let's take it slow, okay?" His tone was gentle, but beneath it was a steel of protection, the invisible barrier he had spent 12 years building. Over the following days, Mark's presence grew in small, deliberate ways. He attended school events, lingered in the background of Lily's life, always careful not to overstep, yet present enough to ignite questions she had never dared ask. "Why didn't you come before?" Lily finally asked one afternoon, her small hands fiddling nervously with the hem of her shirt as they sat in the park, Mark's shadow stretching beside her on the grass. His eyes softened, a deep, aching regret underlying his every word. "I had my reasons, and I made mistakes. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here now, if you'll let me." David watched from a distance, heart constricted with both fear and something heavier, something like resignation. He had imagined this day countless times, each scenario ending in confrontation, heartbreak, or rejection. But reality was far more complex. By the chapter's end, Lily was no longer just David's child or Mark's daughter. She was herself, navigating the complexities of love, identity, and belonging. David and Mark, though imperfect, began to understand that fatherhood came in many forms, that love could coexist even amidst tension, and that patience was the most crucial gift they could give her. Lily, torn between worlds, began to see that the heart was not a finite space, and that connection could grow wider than the limitations she had feared dot in this chapter. The story reaches its emotional crescendo, highlighting the fragile tension between loyalty and curiosity, devotion and discovery, showing readers the deeply human struggle of balancing love, trust, and identity. The stage is now set for reconciliation, understanding, and the possibility of a family reborn, with all the complexity, tenderness, and missinesses that makes life and love truly real. The first morning after the storm felt almost surreal. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the floor, and for the first time in weeks, the apartment felt calm, balanced, and open. Lily sat at the kitchen table, sketching quietly while David brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the room, and Mark quietly tidied up the counter, careful not to overstep. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary. A moment where all three existed in the same space without tension, hesitation, or fear. The long shadows of resentment and guilt had faded, replaced by the fragile, steady light of understanding. They were learning to navigate life together, not as rivals, not as substitutes, but as three people linked by love, choice, and patience. "Lily, come show me what you've been working on," David said, leaning over her shoulder with a gentle smile. She held up her sketchbook, revealing drawings of all three of them: the apartment, the park, the stars at night, each line filled with care and intention. Mark crouched beside her, pointing to a drawing of the three of them sitting on the park bench. "I like this one," he said softly. "It shows us together, all of us." Lily's lips curved into a small, hopeful smile, and David felt a pang of both pride and humility. This was what he had hoped for, not competition, but coexistence. A family expanding in love rather than shrinking in fear. The day continued with shared routines that once belonged exclusively to David and Lily. They went grocery shopping together, Mark carrying bags with careful attention, Lily teasing him about his awkward grip. Lunch was a laughter-filled affair, punctuated by playful arguments over who made the best sandwiches, echoing the sound of a family finally finding its rhythm. David watched from across the table, noticing how natural these moments felt despite the years of tension and absence. He realized that love, patient and uncheckable, had found a way to stretch wide enough for both men and the child they adored. Yet, reconciliation was not without its moments of raw honesty. Later, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the living room, they sat together on the couch, and David broke the silence. "Mark, I need to thank you," he said, voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I know it hasn't been easy for you, for Lily, or even for me. But I see the effort you're making, and I see the love you have for her. That's all I ever wanted." Mark's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And I see what you've done for her. You've been her rock, her guide, her world. I couldn't ask for anything more than to be part of what you've built." The moment stretched, fragile yet full of grace. As both men realized that mutual respect, rather than rivalry, would define their relationship going forward, Lily, curled between them, felt a sense of peace she had never known. "I've missed this," she said softly, her small hands linking theirs. "Not just you, Dad, and not just you, Mark, but all of us together." Her words, simple and sincere, carried the weight of longing, discovery, and forgiveness. She had finally voiced what her heart had felt for months, that family was not about exclusivity, about being the only or the first, but about presence, care, and willingness to be vulnerable. Both men squeezed her hands, silently affirming their shared commitment to love her without conditions or boundaries that limited the heart. The evening brought quiet reflection. David lingered in the hallway, watching Lily and Mark set the table for dinner, the rhythm of their movements unspoken yet synchronized. He thought about the years they had endured alone, the fears he had carried, and the silent prayers he had whispered into the night. Now, seeing them together, he realized that love, when nurtured, could transcend fear, guilt, and absence. It could grow into something broader, more resilient, and unexpectedly beautiful. He allowed himself to hope not just for today, but for the many tomorrows to come. Dinner was a small celebration of ordinary, life made extraordinary by the triumph of reconciliation. They shared stories, laughter, and gentle teasing, the kind that only comes from deep familiarity and affection. Lily laughed freely, no longer torn between worlds, but embracing both, recognizing that love could be shared without being diminished. David found himself smiling in a way he hadn't in years, feeling the warmth of a heart unburdened by conflict and filled with gratitude. Mark, too, felt a quiet joy, the kind that comes not from possession, but from belonging, from finally seeing the fruit of patience and sincerity bloom. Later, as they settled in for the night, Lily tucked herself between the two men who had shaped her life in profound yet different ways. She felt safe, cherished, and seen not as a prize to be claimed, but as a young girl growing into her own, held tenderly by the love of both men. David held her hand. Mark rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. Then together they sat in the quiet, listening to the familiar hum of the city outside, knowing that their journey was only beginning, but that it would be marked by honesty, respect, and unconditional care. Before bed, David lingered at Lily's doorway, watching her drift into sleep with a sense of completion he had not felt in years. He thought of Mark, of the path they had traveled to reach this fragile harmony, and of the small, miraculous truth that love could expand rather than fracture. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We made it. Together." And in the room, the soft, even breathing of the girl he had raised for 12 years reminded him that this was more than a victory. It was a testament to patience, understanding, and the enduring strength of human hearts. By the chapter's end, the family had been reborn, not perfect, not without challenges, but real, resilient, and tender. Lily had learned to embrace complexity without fear. to balance love for both fathers without guilt, and to trust that family was defined not by history alone, but by the choices made each day in care, respect, and presence. David and Mark, though different in approach, had found a common ground rooted in devotion and humility. Together, they had created a family that could weather storms, celebrate joys, and grow in ways no one could have predicted, proving that love, patience, and courage could indeed transform even the most fragile beginnings into a life worth TREASURING. As the night deepened, the quiet settled over them, filled with comfort, hope, and the promise of shared tomorrows. The past no longer threatened their present. Instead, it informed their love, grounding it in honesty, empathy, and resilience. Lily, the bridge between two worlds, lay peacefully, confident that the hearts of both men would guide her, protect her, and love her unconditionally. Then David, watching over her, finally allowed himself to breathe, knowing that what they had built together was unbreakable, a true testament to the enduring power of family. Mark wasn't the enemy in a black and white story. He was a man shaped by mistakes, guilt, and a longing that mirrored David's own devotion, albeit twisted in a different way. And Lily, bright, intuitive, and trusting, was caught in the middle. Her loyalty tested, her identity subtly shifting with each interaction. Tension simmered in the household. Conversations that had once been light and effortless now carried unspoken weight. At dinner, Lily's questions slipped out between bites of spaghetti, tentative yet persistent. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me about him?" she asked, the words more curious than accusatory. David paused, swallowing both the pasta and the flood of emotion. "I wanted to protect you. Some truths are hard to carry when you're young," he replied quietly, aware that each explanation only layered more complexity onto her feelings. Mark sat across the table, silently waiting, a quiet presence that reminded Lily of possibilities she had never considered, a father she could learn from, laugh with, and even lean on in ways David, though devoted, could not always provide. The next week was a collision of emotions, small victories and silent frustrations. Mark tried to help with homework, his approach different from David's, patient yet sometimes clumsy. Lily oscillated between excitement at new discoveries and confusion at the shifting loyalties in her heart. David noticed every glance, every subtle hesitation, every tiny smile exchange that made him feel both proud and helpless. In the quiet moments after Lily went to bed, he confided in his own reflection, voice barely above a whisper. "I've given her everything I could, and it might never be enough." The mirror offered no answers, only the reflection of a man who had loved fiercely and feared deeply. The first argument came quietly, almost silently. Lily, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, confronted David in her room. "I like him, Dad, but I still love you. How can I feel both?" Her voice wavered, tears threatening to spill. David's chest tightened, his fingers gripping the edge of the dresser. "It's okay to feel that way, Lily. You can love both of us. You don't have to choose, even if it feels confusing." He knelt beside her bed, their foreheads touching, the room heavy with unspoken understanding. "Love doesn't work like a race. It grows, it changes, and it can stretch wide enough to hold everyone who cares about you." Lily nodded, relief mingling with lingering uncertainty. Mark, too, struggled. He had envisioned their reunion as a clean slate, but reality was messy, threaded with resentment, guilt, and years of absence. He learned to step back, to respect boundaries, and to wait. "I can't take her from you," he admitted one evening when David finally agreed to let them talk alone in the park. I want her to know me, to see that I care." David nodded, the tension between them softening, though not gone. "Then show her who you are, Mark. That's all anyone can ask." By the end of the chapter, Lily's world had expanded in ways she hadn't anticipated. She began to navigate the delicate balance between curiosity and loyalty, excitement and fear, discovering that love could be more complex than she ever imagined. David and Mark, despite the strain, started to see each other less as rivals and more as men bound by shared devotion, each imperfect but sincere in their care. The once predictable household now pulsed with tension, possibility, and the fragile hope that even disrupted lives could adapt, that hearts, when given space, could grow in ways that were both unexpected and beautiful. In this chapter, the stage is set for conflict, self-discovery, and the emotional storms that follow when the past collides with the present. Lily felt herself caught in the center of a storm she could neither predict nor control. The mornings she spent with David, the man who had been her entire world, felt familiar, comforting, and safe. His routines, his jokes, the quiet understanding in his eyes, they were the foundation she had always leaned on. Yet, the afternoons with Mark brought a strange sense of discovery, as if she were stepping into a room she had never known existed but had always belonged to. Mark was patient, attentive, and eager to share stories of her early years, of her mother, and of the life she had missed. She listened intently, her curiosity growing with every tale, yet guilt pricked at her heart. How could she explore this new connection without hurting the man who had given her 12 years of unwavering love? "Do you ever wonder why I left?" Mark asked one evening as they sat on the park bench, the city lights flickering around them. Lily shook her head, unsure if she wanted the answer or the comfort of silence. "I didn't understand, even when I was younger. I thought maybe you didn't care," she admitted, her voice small but raw. Mark reached out, hesitating before resting his hand gently over hers. "I cared more than I can ever explain. I made terrible choices, but every day I've regretted not being there for you." His words were sincere, yet heavy, the weight of 12 years of absence pressing down on them both. Lily felt a rush of emotions, anger, longing, confusion, but also a fragile thread of connection forming. Delicate yet undeniable. At home, David sensed the subtle shift in her demeanor. She spoke less about school projects, laughed less readily at his jokes, and sometimes lingered in her room, lost in thought. His heart ached, but he reminded himself that love was not about possession. It was about presence, guidance, and understanding. Still, every glance between Lily and Mark felt like a quiet reminder of the life he had built being gently rearranged. One night, frustration overcame him. "Lily, you're acting distant. What's happening?" he asked softly, though the tremor in his voice betrayed the fear he tried to mask. She hesitated, then confessed, I don't know how to feel sometimes. I love you, Dad, but I also like him. I wanted to know him too." David's chest tightened, but he forced a steadying breath. "Lily, it's okay. Feeling both doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you human." He knelt beside her bed, holding her hands as if anchoring them to the moment. "You don't have to choose between love and curiosity. Both can exist, even if it feels confusing right now." His reassurance, gentle and unwavering, reminded her why she trusted him completely. Yet the tug toward Mark, the fascination with the father she had never met, persisted, pulling at her heart with quiet insistence. Mark's presence became more than stories and visits. He tried to create shared moments, small and meaningful. He taught her to ride a bike she had long outgrown the balance for, helped her understand fractions through cooking, and walked with her in the evenings, pointing out stars, constellations, and the patterns he had loved as a child. Lily cherished these moments, yet she noticed the subtle ways David's absence of interference allowed them space, his quiet sacrifice giving her the freedom to explore without guilt. She began to understand that both men loved her differently, deeply, and authentically. David through years of unwavering presence, Mark threw efforts to reclaim lost time. Tensions inevitably surfaced. Misunderstandings, small frustrations, and unspoken expectations created friction between David and Mark. One evening, when Mark offered advice about schoolwork in a tone David found too assertive, the older man's patience cracked. "Lily doesn't need lectures. She needs support," David said, his voice low but firm, the protective instinct roaring through him. Mark froze, not out of malice, but uncertainty, realizing that the delicate balance of trust and boundaries was far more fragile than he had anticipated. Lily, caught between them, felt a lump in her throat, torn between loyalty and curiosity, love and admiration. The emotional weight almost too heavy to bear. The arguments weren't frequent, but they were intense. They forced all three to confront uncomfortable truths: David's fear of losing her, Mark's guilt and desire to reclaim time, and Lily's need to define her own identity within this fractured, evolving family. She began writing in a small journal, documenting feelings she could not yet voice aloud, trying to untangle the knots of love, trust, and belonging. The pages became a private sanctuary where she wrestled with conflicting emotions, joy in discovering a part of her past, pain in seeing David struggle, fear of disappointing either man, and a tentative hope that harmony might still exist. One afternoon, after a particularly tense morning of disagreements, Lily asked to speak with both men together. Sitting on the living room floor, knees drawn to her chest, she spoke slowly, carefully weighing each word. "I need to know that you both care about me. Not in words only, but in how you're here. I need to see that love isn't about being first or only, but about being present, about being real." The honesty in her voice cut through tension like sunlight through fog. Both men exchanged glances, the weight of responsibility settling heavily across the room. David's eyes softened and Mark's lips trembled with emotion. Both men understanding that Lily's words were not a critique but a plea for connection. Understanding and space to grow. Over time, boundaries shifted. Arguments softened into conversations. Silence gave way to compromise. Lily discovered that love could stretch and hold more than she had imagined. She could laugh with Mark without diminishing the laughter she shared with David. She could learn from one without rejecting the guidance of the other. Every small success, every tender gesture, became a step toward a fragile equilibrium, a balance between past and present, loss and discovery, loyalty and curiosity dot by the chapter's end.